thanks very much for joining us for episode 36 of InTek Freight and Logistics, the podcast. Joined by my co-host, Shelly Austin, president of InTek. Thanks very much for hopping back in. I am the last one I did by myself, actually. So
I know
it was a little lonely in here.
I saw that. You did great, though. You did good. Yes.
On today's edition, we are once again joined by Jeff Brashares. He's the CMA CGM Director of Intermodal Sales, and he was actually the very first guest on our very first podcast. So welcome back.
Yay.
I'm glad to be invited back. I think that I might have done well enough to get a rewind, right?
That's right.
Yeah, this time we're doing video. Back then we didn't have any of this setup here behind us, so yeah, a little bit different, but yeah, we're excited to have Jeff back on. We have a number of things to hit on. We're going to jump around a little bit, much like ocean containers do. That's a little segue for part of it here. So thank you. So we'll be talking about ocean container repositioning. We'll also touch on agriculture and steel. So let's jump right into the containers first of all. So for those a little bit unfamiliar, potentially, tell us the differences between the traditional ocean containers and what people see as intermodal containers.
The domestic intermodal fleet, mostly on the Union Pacific, CSX, and the Norfolk Southern, consists of about 100,000 boxes. They're all 53-foot 13.6 containers. UMAX is the CSX UP program, and EMP is the UP Norfolk Southern program. We offer reloading our own boxes, which are 20-foot, 40-foot standard and high cube, and 45-foot containers from many places inland back to the West Coast. So we're stacking ocean boxes of export to bring them in. And then when they're empty, we go to folks like Shelly Austin, who is a very good customer of ours, and load them back with domestic freight.
So yeah, that's sort of the nutshell of ocean container repositioning. So it's something that's out there. Take us a little bit more through exactly what the program entails for shippers who may be unfamiliar.
Our first priority, obviously, is export. So we offer our import empty containers to export customers to go west. In fact, you mentioned ag. This is the cottonseed ag season, and so we're doing a lot of ag business right now. But basically, we take our fleet in a line from Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Louisville, Atlanta, looking west to every major city. And we ship from those major cities going to LA, Oakland, Portland, and Seattle. As mentioned, export goes first. What doesn't go export, we offer our good customers like InTek and Empty, for example, in Denver. They're a big Denver customer of ours for one of our favorite beer shippers. And we ship those boxes to the West Coast. The third choice, obviously, is if we do not get a domestic load, we have to move it empty. And so we would rather load it with either export or domestic product and ship it back to the West Coast with something in it. I will tell you right now, there's some sense of speed because the import business is better currently. And so we're working to people like Shelly as we can to get them to the West Coast on a ship and sent back to China to be reloaded.
So, JB, still today, even though you and I have worked together for quite some time on this domestic repo program, I feel like people just still don't know about it. Like everybody still just, when they hear intermodal, they immediately think the 53s. So tell us a little bit about, do you agree that it's still just this kind of unknown diamond in the rough solution out there? And how do we continue to reach out and get the awareness about the opportunities with this program?
It's interesting you say that because I mentioned earlier, we had a call with another one of our customers today, and that particular subject came up, right? When you get on Soft Modal, which is an IT program that we all share with our intermodal marketing companies, and we post our boxes and our rates there, the first thing you go to is a 53, and nobody goes down far enough in the application to look at 40-foot boxes. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of opportunity to educate people on small boxes. Obviously, the product has to be dense, which is why I mentioned the beer product right at Denver. But beer, food products, things like that fit very well in a 40-foot container. We have one customer that does a huge amount of business with steel coils in 20-foot containers. They're our largest 20-foot container shipment. So you have to go a little bit further into the network, but 40-foot container rates, as Shelley, tend to be less costly than 53-foot containers. Perhaps maybe just a little more work on the dray and the termination, but it's worth it because it's something you can offer your customer to save money.
So to that point, JB, and I'm going to jump all over the place here. That's just how I am. So you mentioned steel and you mentioned the heavier commodities, and
Yes.
in yes, I totally agree. Everybody would want a cheaper rate, but I think in that instance, there's also a better opportunity for less blocking and bracing. Those heavier commodities fit better in a 40. What are your thoughts in regards to additional benefits on moving with these boxes versus just straight cost?
Actually, it's an excellent point, because if you take the commodity that we've talked about, beverages, for example, most beverage loads are 40-foot container loads already that you're spending $250 in to block and brace a load to go to the West Coast in a 53-foot container, where here they fit very well. The other thing I think you get in a 40-foot container is probably less movement. It's a smaller box. The unit is more tightly packed with your product. And so I think anybody with heavy loads, beverages, plastics, steel coils, obviously, because we mentioned steel coils doing a lot of business, there's a lot less blocking and bracing to this product than perhaps other products in a 53.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of in to reach out to the shippers that do these types of things. I think it's really the job of ourselves, the IMCs, to get to these shippers and explain this to them. As you just mentioned, you're talking to the IMCs all the time and giving them this information. And it is a little bit more of a complicated process, but I think once you get that process down, it isn't. It isn't bad. I mean, it's like anything else, like riding a bike or anything else. It seems horrible at first. You may fall on your face and have a few cuts and bruises. But once you get it going, then it just becomes second nature. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and the fact of the matter is, people like you, Shelley, at InTek have excellent relationships with BCOs, beneficial owner shippers, right? And so we can reach out to you and offer you a product that we couldn't sell to 10,000 customers, but you're talking to these people every day, right? You understand the ins and outs of what they ship, and where we have boxes. As mentioned before, we have boxes in every major city in the Midwest and West, even as far west as Salt Lake City. So it gives you another tool in your tool belt, which, as we've discussed, tends to be less costly than a 53-foot container.
Yeah, I think that's cool. So I'm gonna again flip back and create havoc on our little podcast here. Let's go back to your cottonseed. And JB, you and I have some history with cottonseed here.
Correct.
Yes, Amarillo. So my question to you
We
on
might need more of an explanation on that. I don't know.
yeah, probably not. It might take forever.
Different podcast.
Different podcast. Yes. So in looking at that, I totally get steel and I totally get the heavier commodities. Tell us what, on the ag side of things, how does that become a big play? Because, everybody thinks ag is carload, and traditionally ag is carload, and it should be carload. So when are there instances that a 40-foot intermodal domestic repo program is a good fit for ag?
I shared with Kevin a little bit earlier when we were talking, this is cottonseed season. And cottonseed traditionally moves, as you know, in carload, because we've been to Amarillo and we've seen it in person. But in export, it can move in containers. And in fact, we are running a cottonseed train right now every other week from Memphis to a place called Oakdale, California, of 220 loads. And that cottonseed goes into, as you know, feed for cattle on the West Coast. It's a brand new train service. It operates bi-weekly. We've moved 220 loads a week every other week for the last, we're on train number 8. And it's a less costly way to move product to the West Coast, particularly in an area that isn't rail served. Obviously, if you have a boxcar of cottonseed, you have to have a rail siding to unload it. This particular facility specializes in export, and they specialize in transloading containers. And so for somebody like CMA, we're actually seeding, get it? There's a little joke there. We're seeding the export market at a place called Central Valley Ag in Oakdale. So we ship cottonseed domestically and they reload the boxes for export. So for us, we get two moves out of it, but we don't have to move an empty someplace where there is actually export business taking place.
So there again, we're not even talking just straight cost, right? We're talking you normally could move it on a mode. The preferred mode for ag is carload, but if you don't have the ability to have a carload solution in the certain area, that's when the intermodal boxes are a great play. So in combination with that, steel again is another commodity that we've talked about that fits very well in the 40-foot containers, but that one as well is usually a carload commodity. And
Correct.
so for steel, what we have found is they do want to move it carload, and when you can move it carload, that's fantastic. But we're starting to see that it's becoming a much more time sensitive product. So if it becomes a time sensitive product, that could be why a lot of people would look for steel to move in an intermodal solution. Would you agree with that one?
Yes, we see sheets like you and I have talked about, right, in 40-foot containers palletized. And we see coils, as I mentioned before, in 20-foot containers where either cradles are built or bought because they make them to return empty. And we probably do 100 to 200 coil loads a week to the West Coast. It's easy, it's fast, and it's less costly than doing carload.
Do you feel that the steel community is understanding on what's needed when they do container business, or is that something that needs a little bit more education as well regarding the blocking and bracing? Well known that it doesn't take as much in a 40 as it does in a 53, but do you think that's widely known to be an easy transition for them?
I think it's probably a whole new world. If you went back as far as
Disney
I do,
reference right there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm
It's
not
a whole
gonna,
new world, Aladdin. If you go back,
I'm not
if you
going to
go
sing,
back-
by the way.
Okay.
if you go back, 50 years ago when I started in business at the Erie Lackawanna Railroad, there were no intermodal commodities moving in the steel business, right? It was all carload. In fact, that's what we focused on, the carload business. But I think now it gives you a lot more options to go to a steel company and ship smaller amounts of steel more quickly to more people in a shorter period of time. And I think for us, it's a good focus with you because we can provide the box and the service, and you can provide the customer a new opportunity.
Awesome. And one of the things that we utilize a lot, and I know, JB, I think you got us hooked onto this, is that the railroads are very, very good about helping work with the shippers if they haven't done it before in loading a 40-foot container or loading a 53-foot container. They are very quick to help give loading diagrams, give guidance, and give certain things to make sure that they go successfully, because that's the one thing with these commodities is we want to make sure they're successful, right? There have been situations, everybody's dealt with situations where it didn't go so well, but if you're proactive and work with the engineers and work with everybody, then I think you've taken the right steps to be successful with moving them on containers.
Amen. Another commodity that wasn't thought about a long time ago was rolled paper, right? Heavy rolled paper loads. You and I've talked about that before. It's another opportunity to take something out of carload or perhaps off the highway. Everybody's interested in less carbon and greening of America. And I think you provide a quicker, easier solution and you save the atmosphere, so to speak.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that, JB, and somebody said something to me. I can't remember who. I think they were looking to ship something dust. We have the oddest things. I'm like, who ships dust? But I was trying to figure out what dust was used for, but we'll get there. But they mentioned something about carbon credits, and
Correct.
and so can you fill us in a little bit of what carbon credits are?
Well, I would take the 100,000-foot level and say that every railroad, as you know, has a carbon calculator on their website. Companies and customers trade credit to be a good guy in the greening of America. There are companies that specialize in this, obviously. And going back to your dust comment, a couple of years ago during COVID, we actually had a customer that wanted to ship coal dust in intermodal containers for export. I have no idea what you do with coal dust. Perhaps you put it in a furnace when you get to another country, but basically, any product that you can save and get green credits. You and I had a conversation with Shell a couple of years ago when we were at the IANA meeting about their credits. I think is a good guy right now.
Yeah, I think
Or
that's
girl.
I think that's extremely interesting. So we've talked about beverages, we've talked about steel coils, we've talked about ag and dust. So what are some of the other popular commodities that you see running on the 40s right now?
Canned goods, regular paper loads, basically, and paper is a big commodity. Canned goods we see as a big commodity. We do business with tile companies and carpet companies, just basically anything that you can see that weighs out before it cubes out. And going back to highlighting again, it's less blocking and bracing in a 40-footer than it is in a 53. So everybody's interested in saving money. That's the drive right now.
Yeah, and I would say, JB, what we experienced is, we ran across an odd one in our beverage customer where they were concerned about the stability of the floor. And we quickly proved that that was not a concern in regards to, as long as you're evenly distributing the weight, as long as you're making sure that you're using a legitimate provider such as CMA, who is checking their boxes to make sure that they're in good quality, doing your pre-trip inspections, so working with your dray carriers to make sure they're doing a good job in inspecting the box to make sure it is in good quality. These are things that are not an issue. When I don't want to say not an issue, because anytime I say not an issue, it's something.
It's an issue.
It becomes an issue. But as long as you're proactive, it should not be something that you're constantly worrying about when it comes to moving these heavier commodities.
When I came here after being almost 50 years in the intermodal business, I thought I was a pretty smart guy after being in IMC. But I've learned a lot here, and there are a lot of things that you can do here, like you just mentioned, that you can't do on 53-foot containers. And I will tell you, Shelley, and you know this probably as well as any of our customers, we have an awesome operating team here. And I think, like you, because we learned this from you, you go the extra mile for your customer. We try to go the extra mile for our customer too. We talked about the beer customer in Denver, Colorado, and you and I worked together with our operating team to put 46,000 pounds in containers that normally haul 42.5. So the jumping out of the box opportunities like that, the lanes that aren't traditional, like Memphis to Oakdale, we've been willing to look at opportunities here that were probably never looked at before. And with you, we've been successful, and with others, we've been successful. And we want to continue to do that for the IMC community.
Well, how important is it for, I mean, you mentioned the order, obviously, for CMA is export, fill it with something, or it's empty.
Move it empty.
Yeah. And so what is I mean, obviously you don't want it to be empty for a number of reasons. You talked about sustainability already, but how, from CMA's perspective, how important is it to fill these?
So when I came here with our former president, Ed Aldridge, his focus was basically, Jeffrey, we're moving all these empties back to the West Coast and we're not getting them loaded with anything, right? And he said, it's obviously more costly to do that. He said, and his goal was, what can we do to sort of balance this out, right? You go back and forth between, gee, you got to get a box to the West Coast really quickly because import's good versus, what does it cost to continue to provide the overall service? Export, and when Ed was here, by the way, I will tell you that this company had a big focus on export at that time because we committed to pick up every export load that we could pick up during COVID. It was important, right? Because we had a lot of import and we were sending the boxes back loaded. It's still important. Export takes priority here because we want to fill the box with something and take care of our international export customers. But the next goal, Kevin, is obviously, can we load domestic freight in them? Now, there are some cities that we don't do any domestic business out of. And I'll give you one. I've always said, I'll take you to dinner if you load a box in El Paso, Texas to Los Angeles, California, because, it's a short haul. The trucks are pretty inexpensive in a lane like that. But the further you get from the West Coast, the more competitive you can be in your boxes. When I came here, Chicago was our largest shipping point. That's now changed to Memphis, Tennessee, partly because of the agricultural business there that we do, but partly because we put a focus there on our customers and how can we better serve them. So, we've been able to move around and be agile here on customer requests. We've shipped back and forth between Houston and Chicago when we've tried or needed boxes in one city or the other, had an imbalance. And so I think we've been very good to our customers where we could and allow them to do things that are sort of off the grid that are non-traditional.
So JB, you mentioned El Paso. And when I
is there an Amarillo type story there?
Actually, no, wasn't going that direction. When I hear El Paso, I think about Mexico. And so one of the things that we commonly have, so I think it's really important for us to emphasize as we talk about the amazing and wonderful things that the 40 domestic repo, I say 40s, I'm generalizing 40s, 20s,
right.
That we make sure that we emphasize is these are international boxes, right? So what the driving force are imports and exports. So there are, as you just mentioned, there are lanes that don't work. So I commonly get asked if there's 40-foot solutions for Mexico. And it's just really not there because there hasn't been as much import-export activity through Mexico, even though Mexico is coming on strong and we're seeing a lot of intermodal activity in and out of Mexico. It really is strongly in the 53-foot space right now. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, cross-border, particularly thanks to UP Loop. Good friends of both of ours, right? When they started to focus on Mexico, has been in 53-foot containers. We do a lot of Mexican business over San Antonio, where the boxes get drayed down to Laredo and go get loaded across border, get transloaded there and brought back to San Antonio. We did during the box shortage do some El Paso to Chicago to help a customer out and then on to the West Coast. But traditionally, import and some export goes out of El Paso, but it's a lane that's difficult due to it's a short lane and it's a very truck competitive lane because there's a lot of truck traffic. We do a lot of import into El Paso at this particular time, but we've looked at cross-border. Shelley kept coming out of Mexico, for example, starting in Mexico, loading it and bringing it across. It's just, for us, it's difficult because we don't have a domestic system, which is why we have you who have a domestic system, and we'd rather give the boxes to you.
Right. Makes sense.
Are you seeing more and more kind of chatter and questions about Mexico and things like that, just in general out there as we are in that stretch where we keep hearing the nearshoring, and I think we're getting closer and closer to that being sort of fully operational?
I'll use my line that I put in the notes that I sent a little bit ago to you. In my last life, when I was at Pacer, the international people fell under me and we were going through the 2008, 2009 recession. And I said to Alan, when do you think this will be over? And he looks me in the eye and he says, Jeffrey, people in the United States like to buy stuff. It's the number one thing that they do, right? And so the determination, like you just said, is where does it come from? China is obviously still the largest. Putting a tariff on Chinese import product just means you're going to pay more for it. It's not going to stop it, right? Because that's where most stuff is made. But Mexico continues to grow. Shelley and I have a very good friend, Richard Miller in Dallas, who just built a transload warehouse at a facility called Spear Point Logistics. He does dray for both of us. And their goal is
We've had him on the podcast before, actually.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you did, Richard. And you've already heard this. Richard's job is to bring stuff from Mexico up to the Dallas warehouse and distribute it domestically. Shelley and I both do business with him, and I think he's done a good job at it. I don't know how, there are other countries, obviously, right? There's Vietnam and all the other countries over there, but China is still the largest. And I think Mexico obviously has its place, and those countries have their place on what they make.
Hmm.
So, getting back to the agriculture discussion, you mentioned
Yes.
cottonseed is big right now, but one thing some may be curious about is, since it is seasonal, there's times where there's more traveling via train than other times of year. So how does that work in terms of the mix you see putting on the intermodal and putting on the rail hat between those two?
I think ag does different things at different times, right? Let's use Shelley's favorite customer because you just had them on, Musco olives, right?
Right.
Olives are all year long. I consider that an ag product because we eat it, and it exports all year long, and
Yeah.
for some companies it imports all year long. So I think we grow so many products here, Kevin and Shelley, that there is always some ag business available, but cottonseed seems to be, to me, a longer focus. Like I mentioned, we started doing this in January, and we have train service scheduled through September. So it's a pretty robust commodity, and it's been a nice addition to what we're doing here domestically.
Now, do you see any kind of impact on intermodal in terms of availability or anything when there is more going in the traditional carload?
I don't think we're so much affected. We're more affected on and at least the 40-foot part by what does import look like at any time during the year, right? I mean, last fall, like everybody else, business slowed down a little bit, and we had some blank sailings, although we continued to have a pretty robust box supply. But we've sort of developed a cadence since we put this program together, and we've been able most weeks to provide boxes in our major locations, which has made us very lucky and able to serve people like Shelley. Number one goal, serve Shelley. Okay.
I like it.
Well, speaking of the market in general, obviously you talked about pandemic time frame. There's just a constant, you got to get these back to the coast, get them back to the ports, keep it moving. And now we're in a situation where there are plenty of 53s out there as well. There's still a lot of capacity in the sort of traditional sense. So has that impacted the repositioning side of things for you in terms of interest or that kind of thing?
No, and I wish I could explain it, because if I could explain it, Kevin, I would bottle it. We have had domestically, we have had the best, however many weeks we've had since January, since I came here in September of 2020. And I think we're sort of the antithesis of what you just described, right? The 53-foot market, when we talk to Shelley and all of our customers, is still kind of a drag. By the Buckinghams, by the way, and you've got a particularly big focus of the 53-foot providers who own their own boxes that need to keep them turning, right? If you don't move a box, you're not making any money, and you're paying for something, an asset that's sitting there. We're in the same position, but we have found so far this year that the small box business has been quite dynamic. The service obviously is a lot better. I started this morning's presentation with this other company about all the woes of COVID, right? I mean, the rail service was terrible. The ramp service was terrible. Everything was in storage. You couldn't get a chassis. All that part has gone away. And I think that's one thing that's helped increase our business, because like Shelley provides to her customers, we're providing a more consistent, reliable service with people like the Santa Fe. And I think people appreciate that. I really do.
Is it a situation similar to the whole conversation about, in your experience, intermodal? You have sometimes there's shippers who are hesitant to take the leap, basically, but once they do, they stay. So is it the same kind of thing, you think, where people have gotten into the repo side of things and realized this is working pretty well for us, we're not going anywhere?
Oh, this is not so bad, right? Maybe we should be doing more of it, right?
Yeah,
That's a good line, Kevin. In fact, Shelley started a new customer this week that we worked together, and you you know how Murphy's Law is, right? You got to cross your fingers and hope, which is not a strategy, hope that the first few loads go well because you've gotten somebody to make a change, give you the business, and you want to make sure you perform, right? And things are always going to happen, right? I mean, railroads have derailments, the cars go bad order. Customers understand that, right? I wouldn't say it was hard to understand during COVID, but it was more difficult because just the sheer volume of freight that people were trying to move, the network wasn't built for Easter Sunday, right? The network was built for more of this than this. So I do think we have had customers come back to us that left during COVID that had some big honking or storage bill out in California, or they couldn't get chassis and had a big chassis bill. So I think now's the time to give it a try. One of the things I really like about Shelly is she's willing to try new things, and she became a customer of ours very early on when I got here, and I appreciate that.
Well,
we appreciate that.
We like it because we provide a service that not everybody provides. And so that makes it a good tool for us to have as we're talking to different customers. And, you know, a lot of times the customers really enjoy it because as we spoke about early on in the podcast, they really had no idea this was another option for them to look at. And so I think that as we continue to just do podcasts like this and get the communication out there, we're going to find more and more interest to try the service.
Amen. I think education is key. Shelly and I just came back with Miss Christy Knichel at Knichel Logistics from the Transportation Intermediaries Association. And I think we've done a good job over the last, I can't remember how many years, more than 30, but probably less than 50, of educating people on our broker community on A, intermodal in general, and B, Kevin, to your point, what's the fit for a 40-foot container in this particular network and what you were doing. And so we're big on education. Let's go speak to somebody and try to convert more people.
Exactly.
The option piece of it is really big. I think, you know, people a lot of times look at freight and they think, oh, I have to do it this way or that's it and I'm stuck.
Correct.
But sort of opening their mind to the other options, and people are usually willing to listen if there's a good incentive for it.
Absolutely.
I think the other, and I hate to admit this, I'm not a social media guy, but I think one of the other things that Shelly has done very well is promote business on social media, which is, as you know, everybody reads all this stuff every day. They're connected in their mind and their body and their cell phones to social media. And it's been a good avenue to get the word out to younger people because that's who's taking over from older guys like me, right? I mean, it's the younger generation that's coming in. So it's a good education process.
And we love that you bring it up, but I cannot take ownership. It is all Kevin and Rick. They're the Oz behind the curtain when it comes to that. Yeah, I'm lucky to know what my kids are doing on social media. So yeah, but thank you. I agree. I think that the more we're able to put the message out there in all the different platforms, that helps spread the word.
I would agree. It's a good network, obviously, because it's what people are looking at.
You mentioned the TIA meeting that you were just at. We actually put a short video from the little interview you did with Shelly and Christy actually there. Hit the table. Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, it's all about just getting that information out there and you know, people who are, you know, good speaking about it, interesting conversations, you know, just a little bit of short bits are sometimes better for consumption than sometimes people just, you know, they pick it up that way.
Yeah.
Don't you think that Christy and Shelly did an amazing job on that video? I thought the video was great.
Yeah.
I think JB did an amazing job. You know, you led us to the right questions. Ask me a question, I can talk all day long.
The Christie plan did not turn out to be the actual plan, right?
Right.
What we should do is interview you two, and you did a great job. So I appreciate that.
Well, we always mix it up a little bit, JB, and that's how it rolls.
Amen. Amen.
All right. So before we let you go, any roller coaster plans for the summer? I mean, we've got Memorial Day coming up as we record this. So what's on the docket for the theme parks? I
was at Kings Island last Friday morning in the rain for a coaster event and had to had to leave because I had a car show to run on Saturday. Tomorrow morning, I'm leaving at 3 a.m. to participate in Media Day at Kings Island at 6 a.m. for a new Snoopy coaster in Snoopy Land.
Oh
And
my goodness, Snoopy. We got
Snoopy, and the Coaster Mania is June June the 7th at Cedar Point. So a lot of coaster events coming up.
I want a picture of the Snoopy dance.
You've got it. We'll get
Okay.
it taken care of.
Okay. All right.
3 a.m. is early even for me to get in the car and go to a coaster event. So I'll be in the car if you want to call.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for doing this, by the way. I think this is a great opportunity to share with customers, by the way, not just what we do, but all the people you've interviewed. And Kevin, I think you do a great job, and Shelley knows how I feel about her customer service. It's just top notch.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, JB.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. We always welcome.
Thank you very much. You all have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Take care.
Well, thanks very much for joining us for this edition. Thanks again to Jeff Brashares for coming back on the podcast, and really fun conversation that time as well, as expected.
He is always a joy. I mean, he always has great content, wonderful information to share. And your question about the coastering, I think, is the perfect way to end it. I always love to know what his next coaster is. And I'm telling you, this Snoopy one is very interesting.
I didn't ask, we didn't talk about that question ahead of time at all, but I just knew. I knew there'd be something good there. Yeah. And actually, my family, we're going to go to Kings Island pretty soon too. So the kids might try that one out, and I can report back on that one too.
I want some pictures. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us on this edition. We are happy to have you listen or watch however you consume this podcast, and wherever you do, please drop a comment. Follow us, subscribe, wherever, and we always appreciate that. We'll be happy to chat with you, get in touch. If you have any questions that are, a little more detailed than something that you might drop in a comment, feel free to email us at podcast@intechlogistics.com, and our website is intechfreight-logistics.com for more about what we do. Shelley, thanks very much for hopping on again.
Kevin, always enjoy it. Thank you.
And we will talk to you next time.